Commander Rixus stood motionless before the observation window of the Kronak scout ship, his scaled armor gleaming under the dim lights. Earth's blue sphere hung before him, a planet that had been merely another surveillance target until today. His razor-sharp claws clicked against the metallic console as he rewound the footage for the 5th time. The recording showed a human female approaching a massive Earth predator, what the locals called a tiger. By all logic, the scene should have ended in bloodshed. Instead, the tiger rubbed its head against her hand, purring like a content infant. The human even pressed her face against its fur in what their research identified as an affectionate gesture. "Impossible," muttered Science Officer Vex, her spines bristling with agitation. That creature could tear her apart with one swipe. The humans must be using some form of advanced neural control. But they weren't. The Kronax's sophisticated scanners had confirmed it. No technology, no force fields, no genetic modifications. Just trust and mutual affection, concepts that seemed absurd to the predatory Kronak species. The Kronaks were apex predators themselves, feared across 3 galaxies for their lethal efficiency and warrior culture. Their own evolutionary path had been shaped by constant combat and survival of the fittest. The idea of willing cooperation between predator and prey defied everything they understood about natural law. "Display secondary observations," Rixus commanded. The screens flickered to life, showing dozens of similar scenes from across the planet. Humans coexisting with wolves, bears, sharks, and countless other predatory species. Even more baffling were the domestic relationships. Humans sharing their living spaces with smaller predators they called cats and dogs. Their young, Vex noted with increasing disbelief, they allow their young to interact with these creatures. The footage showed human children romping with dogs twice their size, the powerful animals displaying remarkable gentleness. Lieutenant Kraz, the ship's security chief, flexed his battle-scarred claws. Perhaps they are simply too primitive to recognize the danger. Many species exhibit reduced survival instincts before achieving space travel. But Rixus shook his head. No, their technological advancement is evident. They understand the risks. They choose to form these bonds despite them, or perhaps because of them. The revelation shook the Kronax crew to their core. Their species had achieved dominance through power and fear. Humans, by contrast, had mastered something far more subtle and potentially far more powerful: the ability to turn natural enemies into allies. We must understand this capability, Rixus decided. It could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies relations. The implications were staggering. If humans could befriend Earth's predators, could they possibly? The thought remained unfinished as a new alert flashed across their screens. Their cloaking field had attracted attention, not from Earth's primitive detection systems, but from something else. A human research facility in a remote location had detected anomalies in local wildlife behavior. The animals seemed aware of the Kronax presence, even through their most sophisticated concealment technology. Dr. Raina Patel, the facility's lead researcher, stood in the observation tower, frowning at her instruments. The wolves they studied had been acting strangely for days, gathering in unusual patterns and staring at empty sections of sky. Her lifetime of work with predatory species had taught her to trust their instincts. "Something's out there," she murmured, adjusting her equipment. "And our friends know it." Above her, hidden from human sight, Commander Rixus made a decision that would change the course of both species forever. "Prepare for surface reconnaissance," he ordered. "It's time we learned exactly what makes humans so special." The Kronax crew prepared their disguise protocols and observation equipment, but they were about to learn that studying humans was unlike anything they had encountered before. Their own predatory nature had always been their greatest strength. Now, for the first time, they wondered if it might be a limitation. As the scout ship descended through the atmosphere, cloaked in the darkness of night, none of them realized they were about to become part of an experiment themselves. The humans' ability to befriend dangerous creatures was about to be tested on an interstellar scale, and the Kronax would never be the same. The first direct contact was approaching, not as conquerors or prey, but as something unprecedented in Kronax history. Potential friends. The very concept sent shivers through their armored bodies. They were about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or strength, but an ability they had never imagined possible. The power to see past fangs and claws to find connection with any living being, no matter how dangerous. The Kronax observation team huddled in their camouflage blind at the edge of the Wildlife Research Facility's grounds. Their advanced morphic technology allowed them to appear as shadows among the trees, but the wolves still knew they were there. The pack had maintained a loose circle around their position for hours, neither approaching nor retreating. Fascinating, Vex whispered, her scientific curiosity overshadowing her warrior instincts. They don't perceive us as prey or predator. They're curious. Commander Rixus watched Dr. Patel through their bioscanners as she moved among the wolves with casual confidence. The pack acknowledged her presence with respectful distance, occasionally approaching for gentle interactions. Her vital signs showed no fear response, despite being surrounded by creatures that could easily kill her. Begin Phase 1, Rixus ordered. Lieutenant Kraz activated their biosignature modulator, gradually allowing their natural predatory presence to become detectable. According to their research, Earth's predators should scatter or attack. Instead, the wolves' behavior grew more intriguing. The pack formed a protective circle around Dr. Patel. They're warning her, Vex realized, her spines rippling with excitement. Not fleeing, not attacking, protecting the human. Dr. Patel noticed the change in her wolves immediately. Their behavior matched responses to large predators, but something was different. She activated her data recorder, speaking quietly into it, pack exhibiting unusual protective formation, similar to responses to bear or mountain lion presence, but more coordinated. Something's got them very interested. She pulled out her thermal imaging device, sweeping it across the tree line. For a moment, she caught something. Shapes that shouldn't be there, heat signatures that made no sense. Well, she murmured, either I'm losing my mind, or we got some very unusual visitors. The Kronax team tensed as she walked directly toward their position, her wolves flanking her. Their cloaking technology was the best in known space, but somehow this human had detected them through their camouflage. I know you're there, she called out calmly. And I'm guessing if you wanted to hurt us, you would have done it already. My friends here seem to think you're worth checking out, and I've learned to trust their judgment. Rixus made a decision that went against every protocol in Kronax history. With a gesture, he deactivated their cloaking field. Dr. Patel's eyes widened, but she didn't scream or run. The wolves growled softly, but held their position at her sides. Before her stood three beings that looked like a cross between Earth's ancient raptors and armored warriors, their scaled bodies gleaming with an otherworldly iridescence. Remarkable, she breathed. You're beautiful. Of all the reactions the Kronax had anticipated, this wasn't one of them. Beautiful. Their species was called many things across the galaxy. Lethal, fearsome, unstoppable, but never beautiful. You are not afraid, Rixus stated, his translator converting his clicks and growls into English. Oh, I'm terrified, Dr. Patel admitted with a small laugh. But terror's an old friend when you work with apex predators. The trick isn't not being afraid. It's not letting fear stop you from making connections. She held out her hand, palm up, in the same gesture she used with her wolves. The Kronax stared at it, baffled. It's an invitation, she explained. A way of saying I'm willing to trust you won't hurt me, and I hope you'll trust the same of me. Vex's scientific instruments were recording everything, but the data couldn't capture the gravity of this moment. A human, knowingly facing an alien predator species, offering trust freely. Slowly, fighting against millennia of ingrained warrior instincts, Commander Rixus extended his clawed hand. The touch was gentle, careful, predator meeting predator, with neither dominance nor submission, but something entirely new. The wolves relaxed, sitting down around them as if this were the most natural thing in the world. To them, perhaps it was. They'd learned long ago that their human could make friends with anyone. "I'm Dr. Raina Patel," she said, "and I'm guessing you have quite a story to tell." Over the next few hours, as the sun set and the wolves kept their vigilant circle, the Kronax shared their mission. They explained their fascination with humanity's ability to bond with dangerous creatures, their confusion over the concept of mutual trust between predator and prey. "Your species defies everything we understand about natural law," Vex explained, her scientific excitement barely contained. "You take creatures that should be your enemies and turn them into companions." "How?" Dr. Patel considered this, absently scratching behind the ears of a massive gray wolf. "We don't turn them into anything. We just see them. Not as enemies or friends at first, just as they are. The friendship part comes from mutual respect and understanding. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But we're always willing to try, even knowing they could kill you." Kraz asked, still struggling with the concept. "Especially then," she replied. "The greatest bonds often come from choosing to trust despite the risks. Look at your own species. You're clearly powerful predators, but here we are, having a civilized conversation, because we both chose to try understanding instead of fear." The Kronax team exchanged looks. They had come to study humanity's ability to befriend dangerous creatures, never imagining they would become proof of that very capability. "We would like to propose an experiment," Rixis said finally. "A cultural exchange. We want to learn this ability of yours. And perhaps in return, we can offer our own knowledge of the galaxy's predatory species." Dr. Patel's eyes lit up with the same excitement they'd seen when she worked with her wolves. "An interstellar partnership in predator-prey relations. Count me in." As night fell completely, human and Kronax sat together under the stars, surrounded by peaceful wolves, beginning to plan something unprecedented in galactic history. The experiment was no longer about observing humanity's unusual abilities. It had become about learning them, about bridging the gap between two very different approaches to life in the universe. The wolves, for their part, seemed quite satisfied with this arrangement. After all, their human had made yet another impossible friendship, and as far as they were concerned, that was just business as usual. In the weeks that followed first contact, the wildlife research facility transformed into an unprecedented interspecies cultural center. The Kronax had moved their ship to a hidden valley nearby, and a remarkable exchange of knowledge began to unfold. "Observe their approach," Dr. Patel instructed, leading Rixis and his team toward a new group of rescue wolves. These weren't the familiar pack that had witnessed first contact. These were recently arrived, still wild and distrustful. The key is reading their body language and respecting their boundaries. The Kronax watched intently as she demonstrated, her movements slow and deliberate. Their natural instinct would have been to establish dominance immediately, but her approach was entirely different. "Body low, eyes soft," she explained. "Show them you're not a threat, but also not prey. You're just present, available for interaction on their terms." Rixis attempted to mimic her posture, fighting against his species' ingrained combat reflexes. The nearest wolf raised its head, studying him with keen interest. Despite the Kronax's fearsome appearance, something in his changed demeanor sparked the wolf's curiosity. "Remarkable," Vex murmured, recording everything. "Their threat assessment appears to be based more on behavior than appearance." A young wolf, bolder than its companions, took a tentative step toward Rixis. The commander held perfectly still, remembering Dr. Patel's instructions about patience. The wolf sniffed the air, then, to everyone's amazement, wagged its tail slightly. "Well done," Dr. Patel beamed. "You've got a natural talent for this, Commander." The success with the wolves was just the beginning. The Kronax shared their knowledge of exotic alien species, and Dr. Patel's team began developing theoretical frameworks for interstellar wildlife interaction. They called it universal bonding theory. the idea that certain principles of trust and respect could work across any species barrier. But the greatest breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter. Commander Kraz called one evening, his usual military formality tinged with excitement. "You need to see this." In the ship's observation room, the security feeds showed something extraordinary. Junior Science Officer Nix, the youngest of their crew, was sitting cross-legged on the ground near the ship. Around her, a group of local children had gathered, drawn by their curiosity about the strange visitors. Protocol dictated immediate intervention. Contact with human young was strictly forbidden. But Rixus hesitated, watching the scene unfold. Nix was showing the children how her scales could change color, shifting through iridescent patterns. The children were delighted, showing her in return how they could make different faces and sounds. There was no fear, no tension, just pure curiosity and joy in discovering each other's differences. Their young show no innate fear response, Vex noted, adding to her ever-growing research data. The capacity for friendship appears to be their default state. Dr. Paddle joined them in watching the interaction. "Children often see things most clearly," she observed. "They haven't learned to let fear override their curiosity yet." The scene below had evolved. The children were now teaching Nix to play something called tag, while their parents watched from a careful distance. The young Kronax officer was surprisingly agile, deliberately moving just slowly enough to keep the game fun for the children. "This changes everything," Rixus said quietly. "Not just human-predator relations, but the entire basis of interspecies contact." The implications were staggering. The Kronax had always approached other species as potential threats or subjects to be dominated. But here was proof of another way, one that might actually be more powerful. Word of the experiment began to spread. Other xenobiologists arrived, drawn by rumors of impossible breakthroughs in interspecies communication. The Kronax High Command, initially skeptical, became increasingly interested as reports filtered back. One afternoon, as they watched a joint team of human and Kronax researchers working with a newly arrived group of big cats, Dr. Patel voiced what they'd all been thinking. "We're not just building bridges between our species," she said. "We're creating a whole new way of thinking about life in the universe. Imagine what we could learn if we approached every new species with friendship first, rather than fear or dominance." Rixus, who had once viewed such thoughts as dangerous weakness, now understood their profound strength. He watched as Nix guided a visiting scientist through their first interaction with a wolf pack, her movements now as fluid and natural as any human wildlife expert. "The galaxy knows us as warriors," he mused. "Perhaps it's time they knew us as something more." That evening, as humans and Kronax gathered for what had become a nightly tradition of sharing stories and observations, a message arrived from Kronax High Command. They had reviewed the research data and reached a decision that would change history. The Kronax would establish Earth as the center for a new galactic wildlife exchange program. Their fearsome reputation would be used not for war, but to protect and study dangerous species across the galaxy. And at the heart of it all would be humanity's extraordinary gift for turning predators into friends. As Rixus shared the news, he noticed something profound. His crew no longer sat separately from the humans, maintaining careful distance as warriors should. They had unconsciously adopted the easy closeness of friends, sharing space and conversation as naturally as the wolves shared their territory. They had come to study humanity's ability to befriend dangerous creatures. Instead, they had become living proof of that very ability. The predators had learned to be friends, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. The warning came during what should have been a celebration. The first official galactic wildlife exchange facility was nearing completion, its sprawling grounds designed to house species from across the known universe. But the urgent transmission from Kronax space changed everything. "The Void Hunters have tracked us here," Rixus announced grimly to the assembled human Kronax team. "They're drawn to our success." Dr. Patel saw the other Kronax stiffen at the name. I take it these aren't friendly visitors. The void hunters are parasitic predators, Vex explained, her scales darkening with concern. They follow successful species, waiting until they've built something valuable, then strike to take it for themselves. They've destroyed entire civilizations. They view your ability to bond with dangerous species as a resource to be harvested, Rixus added. They'll try to capture both humans and Earth's predators, study them, and replicate the capability for their own use. The facility's alert systems activated as multiple ships entered Earth's solar system. The Void Hunters moved with terrible purpose, their bioorganic vessels resembling massive deep-sea predators swimming through space. Evacuation protocols. Kraz began, but Dr. Patel cut him off. No, she said firmly. This facility houses over 300 endangered species from Earth alone, not counting our new galactic arrivals. We're not abandoning them. The Kronax team exchanged looks. By their military doctrine, defending the facility against void hunters was suicide. But they'd learned enough about humans to know arguing would be pointless. Then we stand together, Rixus decided. But how can we fight an enemy that specifically hunts predator species? A slow smile spread across Dr. Patel's face. Who said anything about fighting? You've spent months learning how humans handle dangerous creatures. Time to put those lessons to use on a bigger scale. Her plan was either brilliant or insane. Possibly both. While the Kronax deployed their defensive technologies, the human team began an unprecedented protocol. They released carefully selected predators throughout the facility's grounds, not to attack, but to create a complex ecosystem of cooperative defense. Void hunters rely on causing chaos among predator species, Vex realized, watching the humans coordinate with wolves, big cats, and even their latest arrivals, juvenile specimens of fearsome species from across the galaxy. But these predators aren't fighting each other. They're working together. The first Void Hunter landing parties found themselves in an environment unlike anything they'd encountered. Their usual tactics of triggering territorial responses and predatory instincts failed completely. Instead of chaos, they found cooperation. Wolves worked alongside big cats, Kronax warriors moved in sync with Earth's apex predators, and humans coordinated it all. Fascinating, Dr. Patel commented, watching through the facility's cameras as a Void Hunter squad retreated from a coordinated demonstration by a mixed group of Earth and alien predators. They don't know how to handle predators that aren't trying to establish dominance. The Void Hunters' confusion grew as their typical divide and conquer strategies proved useless. Their attempts to isolate and capture human subjects were thwarted by protective responses from not just Earth's predators, but from the Kronax themselves. They're scanning us for weapons, Kraz reported from his security station. They can't understand why their forces keep retreating from seemingly unarmed positions. The most powerful weapon in the universe, Nick said with newfound confidence, is the one they can't see or steal: trust. The tide turned definitively when the Void Hunters attempted to breach the facility's main research center. They found themselves surrounded by a living wall of cooperative predator species, all moving with synchronized purpose under human guidance. The sight of apex predators from a dozen worlds working together, led by the supposedly weaker species, shattered their entire understanding of natural law. The Void Hunter commander, a towering figure of biomechanical enhancement, faced Dr. Patel across the facility's main courtyard. Behind her stood an impossible alliance: wolves, big cats, Kronax warriors, and even some of the deadliest species from their galactic collection. What is this power? The commander demanded. How do you control them? That's your first mistake, Dr. Patel replied calmly, scratching behind the ears of a massive wolf. We don't control anyone. We're all here by choice, protecting each other because that's what friends do. The Void Hunters retreated that day, their fleet vanishing back into deep space. They had come expecting to find a weapon or a technique they could steal. Instead, they found something their parasitic nature couldn't comprehend: genuine cooperation between predator species. In the aftermath, as humans and Kronax worked together to ensure all their charges were safe and settled, Rixis found Dr. Puddle in her observation post. "You knew," he said. "You knew from the beginning that turning their predatory expectations against them would be more effective than any military defense." She nodded. "The strongest defense isn't walls or weapons. It's having friends willing to stand with you. Even the greatest predator can be stopped by prey that refuses to act like prey." The crisis had proved something extraordinary. Humanity's gift for friendship wasn't just a curious ability. It was a revolutionary force that could reshape galactic relations. The Void Hunters had fled not from superior firepower, but from the impossible sight of predators choosing cooperation over dominance. 1 year after the Void Hunters' retreat, the Galactic Wildlife Exchange Facility had become something far greater than its founders had imagined. The sprawling complex now served as both a sanctuary and a learning center, drawing visitors from across the known universe. From an observation platform overlooking the main grounds, Rixis and Dr. Patel watched a scene that would have been unthinkable just months ago. A class of young Kronax, their scales gleaming in the morning sun, sat in a circle with human students. Between them, a rescued pack of timber wolves moved freely, comfortable with both species. "Remember when you first arrived, convinced we must be using some form of mind control?" Dr. Patel teased. Rixis's scales rippled with amusement. "In our defense, the idea of willing cooperation between predator species went against everything we thought we knew about universal law." Below them, Nyx was leading a practical demonstration on interspecies bonding techniques. The young Kronax officer had become one of their most effective instructors, her natural empathy bridging gaps between species that had once seemed insurmountable. "Today's lesson," Nyx announced to her mixed class, "is about understanding body language across species barriers. Every creature speaks its own physical language. Our job is to learn to listen." The facility had expanded far beyond its original mission of wildlife conservation. It now housed the first interspecies diplomatic academy, where representatives from various worlds came to learn humanity's approach to forming connections across seemingly impossible divides. "The latest reports from Kronax space are fascinating," Vex reported, joining them on the platform. The chief scientist's scales now bore markings of Earth's academic institutions alongside her Kronax military honors. "Our techniques are being adapted for first contact situations across the galaxy. Hostile encounters have decreased by 60%. The impact extended beyond diplomatic relations. The Kronax, once known only as warriors, were developing a new reputation as guardians of endangered species across space. Their fearsome abilities were now used to protect rather than dominate, earning them respect of a different kind." "We have a new arrival," cries called from the communication center. "A Void Hunter ship, approaching under a flag of parley." Rather than tension, the news brought curious interest. Since their failed attempt to seize the facility, scattered groups of Void Hunters had been returning, not to attack, but to learn. Some had been surprised to discover that voluntary cooperation could be more powerful than forced submission. "Send them the usual welcome package," Dr. Petal decided, "and assign them to Nyx's beginner class. She has a way with former predators." The facility's success had attracted attention from the highest levels of galactic society. The Galactic Council, long dominated by species that kept to themselves, was beginning to change. Earth's example showed that strength could come from connection rather than isolation. A commotion from the nursery section drew their attention. One of their most recent successes, a breeding program for an endangered species of space-faring predators, had yielded results. The first cubs born in captivity were emerging under the watchful eyes of both human and Kronax caretakers. "Still hard to believe," Rixis mused, watching the tiny predators take their first steps. "A year ago, we would have considered those creatures too dangerous to approach. Now we're helping preserve their species." The facility's achievements had gone far beyond proving that humans could befriend dangerous creatures. They had demonstrated something far more profound: that the capacity for friendship itself was one of the universe's most powerful forces. New buildings were under construction across the compound. The Interspecies Medical Center would explore healing techniques across different species. The Xenological Research Institute would study how various species formed social bonds. And at the heart of it all, the original wildlife sanctuary continued to grow. "You know," Dr. Patel said thoughtfully, watching a group of Kronax warriors gently handling Earth wolf cubs, "when you first landed here, you wanted to understand how humans could befriend dangerous creatures. But that wasn't really the question, was it?" Rixes tilted his head, curious. What was the real question? Not how we could befriend dangerous creatures, but why we would want to. And I think you found the answer yourselves. She gestured to the scene below, where species from across the galaxy moved in harmony. Because every time we reach across that divide, every time we turn fear into friendship, we make the universe a little less dangerous for everyone. As the sun set over the facility, casting golden light across the gathered species from 1,000 worlds, the truth of her words was evident. The Kronax had come seeking to understand humanity's strange ability to befriend dangerous creatures. Instead, they had helped create something far more valuable. A new way of existing in the universe, where differences were bridges rather than barriers, and even the most fearsome predators could learn the power of friendship. In the end, humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their ability to befriend dangerous creatures. It was showing that no creature had to remain dangerous forever, if given the chance to be something more. The stars emerged above the facility, twinkling down on a place that represented hope for countless species, and in the soft evening air, the howls of Earth wolves mingled with the calls of alien creatures, all speaking the same universal language of friendship that humanity had taught them to share. End.